to Nisht for Me, the podcast that examines the ins and outs of British Jewish culture.
So today's episode is slightly different and quite unique.
Yeah.
It's actually a two-parter. We have an interview with Dave Rich, who's the Director of Policy at CST, and a name probably a lot of our listeners are familiar with because he's...
often front and centre.
Yeah, taken to the airwaves a lot, especially over the last 2 years. Now, we originally did this interview at the end of September.
Yeah.
Just before Rosh Hashanah, in fact. And it was a good chat. It was interesting. It was
uplifting in some ways,
and enlightening. He's got a really good Hamish to Flex story in there. And it was we both came away from that chat feeling kind of buoyed up.
Yeah, and it was due to go out originally on the Monday after Yom Kippur.
And obviously, as many of our listeners, probably all of our listeners are aware, Yom Kippur this year was an especially tragic day. The attack at Heaton Park, which led to the loss of life of Adrian Daulby and Melvin Kravitz, and injury of 3 others, was a seismic day for the British Jewish community.
Absolutely.
You can listen to an old episode of ours if you wanted to get our full thoughts on that. We recorded it the very next day. We were basically trying to process it ourselves and turned a mic on, and that's what happened.
Indeed.
So we felt it didn't feel right to put out the interview for 2 reasons. One, it was relatively jolly. None of us were in a jolly mood. And number 2,
naturally, it didn't reference any of the events because it was recorded beforehand, and because of Dave's position as well as, you know, a representative and spokesperson from the CST, you know, it just didn't feel right to put it out at that time. So what we've been able to do, thankfully, and thanks to Dave, is to catch up today with Dave and to put some questions to him as to how things have changed since Yom Kippur, and just to address really the sort of processing of those, and also to get his take on where we're at as a community in this country. Yeah. And we feel that, as with everything we put to Dave, he answers that incredibly well and in a way that makes you reflect in a positive way. So we're delighted to bring you 2 portions of Dave Rich. And what we'll do is we'll put out the initial interview first. So please do just sort of bear in mind that that this was before Yom Kippur. And then at the end of the interview, we will put out a short edited sequence where we put some questions to Dave about life since and how things have changed. So yeah, just bear that in mind.
We hope you enjoy it and find it as interesting and informative and entertaining, as if that's the right word, as we did. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, get in touch with us, let us know, and happy Hanukkah.
Indeed, yeah. Happy Hanukkah, y'all. Hello and welcome to Nisht for Me, the podcast that examines the ins and outs of British Jewish culture.
Today is a very exciting day. There's a reason why me and Aaron are sort of cozying up next to each other. It's because we are so lucky to be joined by Dr. Dave Rich, who is author, academic, expert on anti-Semitism, as well as the Director of Policy at the CST, which is the body tasked with keeping the Jewish community safe. Welcome, Dr. Dave Rich.
It's a light brief, that.
Very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you.
Absolutely.
So we've got very important matters to discuss, and, you know, your expertise, we would love you to share them with us. But first and foremost, let's talk about the fact that you and I grew up in the same house.
Although not at the same time.
Let's just clarify that. Not at the same time. Also, I just can't help but feel that this story will be a lovely little nugget for the anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists about how, you know, that we keep the property. I don't know, but it is kind of crazy that you are from where I'm from exactly. And yeah, your family lived in my house in Cheadle before, like you were literally the family before.
That's absolutely right, yeah. And your family were the family after. And yeah, I think you're right. The anti-Semites will think they've finally worked out where the elders of Zion actually meet, that it's in a house in Cheadle.
I can imagine this bit being clipped with a floating head sort of pointing it out. Anyway, you're welcome. So we would love to, talk about your childhood being another,
Yeah, we want to get a sense of your Jewish identity, and that seems sort of the sensible place to start.
Yeah.
What would you say what role did your Jewish identity play as a child? How did that sort of manifest itself? Did you go to a Jewish school, or was it just...
It's always there. I didn't go to a Jewish school. There wasn't a Jewish primary school in South Manchester when my older siblings went to primary school, so I just followed them. But look, I grew up, as you say, in the Jewish community in Cheadle, and it was a very intensely Jewish, not in a frum way, not in a religious way, but in a community way. It was very much part of your life. Everyone went to the same synagogue. There was a very rich social life. I went to Habonim. All my friends went to Habonim. So it was just always part of who we were. I mean, Saturday morning was in shul and Saturday afternoon was at the football. I went to United. Half my friends went to City. I mean, so I don't remember it even being a question of not having Jewish identity as part of just the regular patterns and rhythms of life, really.
Mm-hmm.
What was Dave Rich, the bar mitzvah boy, like? Do you remember your bar mitzvah?
Oh, dreadful. I mean, I can't sing now and I couldn't sing then. I can barely remember a word of it, but it was a fun day. I remember that's part of it, but I could not possibly recite my parsha now.
Oh, good.
We're not going to make you.
Yeah.
That'd be a fun bit.
Absolutely.
For every guest.
I've got the first line in me, but that's about it. But I'm not going to.
I do have a friend who, if you tell him the date of your bar mitzvah, he will tell you what parsha it was, no matter what year. And I've seen him. I discovered this talent of his recently, and we were at a wedding, and loads of people were testing him on it, and he got everyone right.
That's hilarious. That's like proper Rain Man, but with a very specific, kind of application there.
Obviously, your job is somewhat of a Hamish flex, but away from your working life, have you got a Hamish flex?
So, in our sort of wider social circle, and I'm talking collectively, my wife Miriam and myself, are quite well known for our roast potatoes. To the point that Miriam has in the past met strangers on the street or at a shiva house and been introduced, and their first words to her are you Miriam roast potatoes?
Wow. It's a great rep. That's fantastic.
But the other one, which I can't claim for myself, but which is, I think, my all-time favorite Hamisha story, is the mother of a very good friend of mine who once went into the hairdresser carrying a jar of Mrs. Ellswood pickled cucumbers, pointed to the picture of Mrs. Ellswood on the label and said, I want hair like her.
Wow. That's phenomenal.
Actually, the thing is, if you saw her, you'd totally see it. You'd totally get it.
But mitzvah, the sort of party that's that celebration of sort of Jewish queer identity. I think people dressed up as Mrs. Ellswood for that one. It's a good.
But she's changed over the years. She's had a recent glow
rebrand,
up, and there's talk. There's some upset that she's become less Jewish over the years, or less obviously Jewish.
Erasure of her identity.
Cultural erasure on the Mrs. Ellswood label. I don't know if that's crossed your desk, Dave. But
maybe that's metaphor for I don't know, assimilation or something.
So, Dave, when you were a little boy, did you always dream of becoming an anti-Semitism expert? Was that what you were hoping for?
Funnily enough, no. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was always interested in politics, and I was always interested in kind of extremist politics because I just found it curious and interesting. I mean, Habonim is quite politicizing. I studied politics and history at university and then just sort of fell into the job in a very Jewish way, actually. I left university, didn't have a clue what to do, didn't have a job. And my mum, who was very worried about me, saw an advert for a political researcher job in the Jewish Chronicle and sent it to me. And so I just applied and ended up without really understanding what I was getting into. 31 years later, here I am.
Was
So
that with the CST?
that was this. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even CST at the time. It was
Right.
before it became CST.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So my mum got her way.
So let's just give our listeners a sort of a sense of what you do. What's a day in the life for you now in your role?
Every day is different, I have to say. I mean, look, broadly speaking, what do? We try and protect the Jewish community from anti-Semitism through physical security. We support victims of anti-Jewish hate crime, and we try and research and understand and analyze and educate about anti-Jewish hatred and all the kind of extremist ideologies that feed into that. And my work is very much on the research and the political and the media side. It's the understanding and the explaining. Surprisingly or not, I'm not that good at the physical protection side. We have bigger people who do that. And every day can be different because every day brings stuff that just comes out of left field. I mean, who would have guessed that some guy who names himself after Bob Dylan would go on stage at Glastonbury and start ranting about killing the IDF, and that's now the slogan of choice, on the streets for it. So every day is different. In some ways, that's what makes the job really interesting, but also challenging. We have really good teams of people here, really talented researchers who know their way around the darkest, most horrible corners of the internet that normal people don't go to. And this is based on decades and decades of what we call intelligence-led security. So we need to know what our community's enemies are up to. And this goes back to a very long tradition, back to the 1960s with the 62 group, and the post-war period with the 43 group, and a lot of CST's founders and trustees. And our chairman, Gerald Ronson, came out of that tradition. Of course, it's all very tech now. It's all very modern. Things change, but those principles don't really. So I think the last 2 years, it's felt like a different environment after October 7th. But a lot of the stuff we're looking at was always there. It's more present. It's more mainstream. But kind of if there's two sort of principles that guide our work, one of them is there's nothing new under the sun, really. And the other is everything you look at to do with anti-Semitism, it's been said before, it's been done before. Some of it was first said 1,000 years ago, and some of it was first said 10 years ago. But it's rare, even though you get these new weird anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, they're all based on very old stuff. And the other principle is you never know what's going on behind someone's front door, right? Anti-Semitism extremists, they don't live on some weird desert island somewhere. It's sort of part of society. We always think it's like this separate section of humanity, but it's not really. And that's also the challenge, I think, is how do you encourage the Jewish community and Jewish people to go about our lives, to live our lives. We do still have really good lives in Britain. And I'm very much a believer that in the broad sweep of Jewish history, modern Britain is one of the biggest success stories. But given everything that's going on at the moment, how do we persuade, encourage Jewish people to recognize the anti-Semitism, do what we need to do to deal with it, but still go about our lives, enjoy the benefits of living in modern Britain?
You say, yeah, so there's nothing new under the sun, but you must have heard some pretty crazy sort of conspiracy theories. Do you have a favourite, like where it's almost like, it's a bit of a strange question, I suppose. What's your favourite anti-Semitic conspiracy theory? But anyway, you think, I mean, they've really gone out on a limb there.
That is not as strange a question as you might think if you worked in our office, I've got to say. I mean, there are so many. I did like the Jewish space lasers one, but now I see this week Israel's actually invented a space laser just to kind of keep up with the conspiracy theories. So you can't.
You should really consult us on these things.
I know, you can't win. My favourites are always the Zionist spy animals that appear in other, the dolphins and the eagles and the sharks.
I've not heard those.
That pop up at the other end of the Red Sea, and apparently, they'll have some Israeli wildlife tracking tag on them, and that makes them a Mossad shark or something. That and the weather, I think.
That we control the weather.
Yeah. I mean, I always think if Jews had the power that we really have, kosher food would not be as expensive as it is, and parking in Golders Green would be free. And right, so that's the proof there's no conspiracy.
I have such disproportionate anxiety about the weather. If only I could just control it, that would be wonderful.
And parking in Golders Green.
So, Dave, can I ask you, how do you stay sane and, not fall into a pit of despair, considering what you are facing every day?
I'm always quite an optimistic person, which has proven harder in the last couple of years, but that's just generally. And I compartmentalize as well. And after October 7th, I got a kitten. That helped.
Wow, nice.
We've always had
No.
cat, and so one of our cats died a couple of years ago, sadly. And then about a month after October 7th, I said to my wife, I think it's time to get a kitten. She was like, okay, this is Dave's therapy kitten.
Emotional support animal.
Yeah. But there's also, there's a lot of positive work going on. And in my position, we get to work with lots of people who want to help, who want to do good things. We see a lot of the life, the Jewish communal life that goes on. We're the ones speaking to all, we talk about allies and so on. I experience a lot of that, both professionally and personally. So that really helps.
Can you share some sort of unusual or unexpected stories of allyship that could cheer us all up?
Yeah, things that are unexpected to other people but weren't to me. I mean, after October 7th, one of the first people to get in touch and express support and sympathy and so on was Iman Abu Atta, who runs the Muslim anti-hate crime organization Tel Mama, who is herself Palestinian.
Wow.
And for me, it was not remotely surprising that she got in touch because we've known each other for years and I know the kind of person she is. But a lot of people find that surprising. But also just friends from across different walks of life, different parts of the country. We, in our Jewish bubble, we're also in a very liberal, professional, graduate bubble, urban bubble. And these are the parts of the country where the sort of Israel-related anti-Semitism is more prominent, let's put it that way. Or the stuff that makes Jews feel uncomfortable is more prominent. There's a whole country out there that is not like that, and I see a lot of that. And then in terms of sanity, it's just about other things. I used to rely on football to make me happy, but I'm a Man United fan, so that doesn't work.
That's not working
anymore. I mean, literally, Man United and Israel are competing with each other, and which one can depress me more? But yeah, I think is focusing on the positives and remembering there are still a lot of positives.
Give us an example of sort of a positive, modern, British, Jewish sort of facet of life.
I think we have a lot more strength and resilience and fight as a community than we imagine. There's a natural Jewish tendency to catastrophize, and there's, as many Jewish jokes as you like about that kind of mentality. But, every Hanukkah, there are more and more public Hanukkah lightings because people want to go out there and express their Jewishness. Because at CST, we get the requests for security at Jewish communal events. We know how many events are going on. And since October 7th, the number's gone up, not down. So there's a lot of resilience. There's a lot of people who've become campaigners, who've become activists. And this happens in every generation. The very first political activity I did really was a Soviet Jewry march in central Manchester when I was like 12 years old. Everyone from my shul went, my parents went, they took us along as kids. My parents were not political activists, but they went on a march for Soviet Jews. That was that generation's fight. The generation before had a different one. In our generation, we've had everything with Corbyn and Labour. Now we've got everything since October 7th. And I think a lot of Jewish people have sort of, it's triggered a reconnection in a way to a certain extent. despite all the difficulties and all the complexities of what your relationship, what people think of Israel or don't think of Israel or whatever, I think whenever the Jewish community gets challenged on these things, we tend to step up. And look, I still come back to Britain is a much less anti-Semitic country than the country that my great-grandparents arrived in, 120 years ago. And in terms of social attitudes, public attitudes, in terms of legal protection, all of that, it's a less anti-Semitic country than the one my parents were born into. So you have to look at that we're in a worse situation now than we were a few years ago. But again, broadly speaking, it's really important not to, I think, over catastrophize about that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I think it potentially one of the things that Jews maybe misunderstand about anti-Semitism. What would you say the things that maybe non-Jews misunderstand about anti-Semitism is such a present topic at the moment? Are there any sort of, kind of like quick hitters of what are the main misunderstandings that are out there?
I think a lot of people don't see it as a type of racism. A lot of people, especially on the left, they see racism as socioeconomic exclusion and discrimination on the basis of color, basically. And they look at Jews and they think, well, you're white and you're pretty well off and you're pretty well integrated and you all go to good universities. So what's the problem? Stop complaining. And built into that is a whole load of stereotypes and misconceptions anyway, about whether Jews are white or not white. And even Jews who present as, Jewish visibility is a whole different thing. It just works in different ways, right?
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think what people don't understand is because Jewish people it's a religion. We're a faith community, but you can be an atheist, and lots of Jews are atheists, but they still go to synagogue and light candles and keep kosher. And it's an ethnicity, but you can be black or white. And it's a nationality of sorts, a peoplehood with a homeland and a diaspora, but most Jews don't live in the homeland, they live in the diaspora. So we don't fit anyone's categories. And because we don't fit anyone's categories of who we are as a people, so the prejudice that we face doesn't fit anyone's definitions of what is racism, what is religious prejudice, and so on and so on. I think people really struggle to know which box to put us in, and therefore which box to put anti-Semitism in, and therefore just miss it when it happens. They think it's to do with the far right, and so therefore if you're left-wing and anti-racist, you can't be anti-Semitic, but because anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory as well as a prejudice, it applies across the board. So I think I think people just come to it with assumptions about what racism is, and because anti-Semitism sometimes doesn't fit it, therefore it just gets missed.
So you've obviously mentioned sort of times shifting in the past couple of years and the vibe shift, shall we say, since October 7th for many British Jews. And I think, we know this, and a lot of our friends and contemporaries know this, that part of that has been having to have these sort of slightly awkward conversations with people, whether it be at the school gates, in the workplace, or out and about things, where that sort of misunderstanding comes into play. So we thought it might be a useful thing wouldn't it be great if we all had Dave Rich in our ear every time we had to have one of those conversations? And so short of us calling you every time, we thought we'd do a little bit of a role play of sorts where Aaron and I channel our inner anti-Semites and sort of talk about some of the top line conversations that some people we have experienced ourselves and other people have experienced, and how best to sort of tackle or approach those conversations, if that's okay with you.
And we can obviously there's a broad range, so if we try and keep it fairly sort of quick fire, imagine the lights coming down, a little quiz jingle. We asked 100 anti-Semites. What? Not that. But do you want to kick us off?
Sure.
Okay.
Anti-Semitism has been weaponized, therefore it's not legitimate.
Anti-Semitism is weaponized by anti-Semites to attack Jews, and there's nothing wrong with Jews pointing it out when it happens.
Nice.
He's very good at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
full points. That was our top, but the opposite. So I don't have a problem with Jews, just Zionists.
Well, most Jews are Zionists, but it depends what you mean by Zionists. If you just mean they believe Israel should exist, has a right to exist, it's pretty weird to look at a country and want to just completely get rid of it. That's a pretty racist attitude. But if you want to critique the Israeli government or Zionism as an ideology in a political way, be my guest. That's ordinary politics. That's not prejudice. But basically using Zionism as a code word for Jews is basically anti-Semitic. I did go, this happened to me a few years ago at an interfaith event, actually, and the leaders of one of the local mosques said to me, we don't have a problem with Jews, we love Jews. It's those effing Nazi Zionists that we hate.
No.
I was
Wow.
like, great, okay.
Hugs?
Exactly.
Blimey.
Wow, that's quite something. Israel shouldn't be in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Israel's in the Eurovision Song Contest because it's in the European Broadcasting Union. And the European Broadcasting Union includes all the countries of North Africa and the Middle East. So Algeria and Morocco and Egypt and Lebanon and Jordan could all enter Eurovision if they wanted to. Israel's not an exception in that respect. If you have a problem with the membership of the European Broadcasting Union, then take it up with them.
Nice.
I'm going to take it a step further. But Israel shouldn't be in Eurovision Song Contest this year, considering what's going on in Gaza.
I mean, the whole point of Eurovision is that it's not supposed to be political, even though everyone knows the voting really is political. It's supposed to be, but this is a bigger issue, right? Some people just want to force politics into everything, so that you cannot escape it. Right, you go to a gig and there's Palestine flags everywhere. You go to football, you watch Eurovision. Da, 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 da. Okay, we all know what's going on in Gaza. We see it in the news every day. We're living with it, and we need some parts of our lives and our world where we can get away from it for just an hour. You know what I mean? Let us just watch Eurovision and not have it forced on us the whole time.
Yeah.
When I go to a gig, the whole point is I want to not have to think about the real world for an hour and just enjoy the music.
Mm-hmm.
And all these artists who go on stage and it's all about Palestine, I think if that's what their fans want, whatever, but a lot of the time, I think they miss the point that the whole reason people love things like music and sport and TV is so we don't have to think about all the terrible things happening in the world for just an hour. Just give us an hour off.
That's great. Great answer. Palestinians are Semites, so how can Hamas be anti-Semitic?
Semite is a false term, right? There is no such thing as a Semitic race. It was an invented term. Who invented it? An anti-Jewish politician in Germany in the 1870s called Wilhelm Marr, who wanted to stand for election on an anti-Jewish platform, but he wanted to give it a scientific sounding name, so he invented the word anti-Semitism because Hebrew is a Semitic language, right? So anti-Semitism from the start was always only about Jews. It was a kind of invented term for anti-Jewish prejudice, right? So, to say, well, Arabic is a Semitic language, well, so's Maltese, I think, and various other languages. It's irrelevant. The idea that Hamas, which has the protocols of the Elders of Zion written into its founding charter, can't be anti-Semitic because they're Palestinian it's not just nonsense, but it's insulting, and it totally delegitimizes the very meaning of what anti-Semitism is. It's profoundly unhelpful.
Why aren't Jewish people speaking up against Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, a lot of Jewish people do. A lot of Israelis do. Jewish people have a wide range of views about Israel. But I don't think there's an obligation on Jews in the diaspora to speak up against anything happening in some foreign country somewhere, even if it's a foreign country that they feel an emotional and a cultural attachment to. You know, I don't expect my British friends of Irish heritage to give me detailed critiques of whatever the Irish government did last week. You know, this doesn't get put on anyone else. And when it does, I mean, when people on the right say, why aren't Muslims criticizing terrorism? Then people on the left tend to say, why are you expecting British Muslims to do that? That's Islamophobic. Well, okay, if that applies here too. You know, Jews in the diaspora care about Israel. The ones who support Israel care about it. The ones who criticize Israel, also it's because they care about Israel because they're Jewish. That doesn't make them responsible for what Israel is doing, what the Israeli government is doing. They're not answerable for it.
And what's the secret to Miriam's roast potatoes?
It's a secret.
It's a conspiracy. Conspiracy is what it is.
We don't give that away, not in such a public forum.
I've got one more. It's a bit personal, this one, and it actually was said to me. The CST, I don't believe the CST figures. They seem overblown in terms of reports of anti-Semitism since October the 7th. I don't believe in CST.
So, if anything, they're understated, because the research that's been done on how many anti-Semitic incidents get reported suggests that only about 20-25% of all incidents get reported to anybody, whether that's CST or the police or any other organization. We apply fairly strict criteria that there needs to be evidence of anti-Jewish language, motivation, or targeting for us to include an incident in our figures. So whereas for the police, if you report a hate crime to the police, if you tell them you perceive that it's motivated by hate, they have to record it as a hate incident or hate crime. We don't follow that. We have to look for independent evidence. So, for example, I mean, because this often gets raised in the context of where does anti-Israel activity become anti-Semitic? For example, if someone stands, you know, in Oxford Circus shouting "Free Palestine" at everyone, we do not count that as an anti-Semitic incident. If they stand outside their local synagogue shouting it at the congregants on a Shabbat morning, we will count that as anti-Semitic, because the victim, the targets are being targeted because they're Jewish. You know, if they stand outside the Israeli embassy and shout it, we won't count it. So we do try to take care to distinguish. We do have criteria. People may disagree with the criteria, but we do our best to apply objective kind of measures to what is or isn't anti-Semitic. And look, every year there are hundreds of reports we receive that we don't include in our statistics because we don't think they meet the criteria. And we publish that in our reports every year.
That's really helpful.
Very helpful. We can just have that on playback.
Yeah. No, but hopefully that will prove helpful to listeners as well, because so many of us you just sort of caught by surprise when you're directly greeted with something that seems so potentially obvious, but to actually have a kind of go-to, as you've just really clearly laid out in each of those cases is incredibly useful.
Very much so. So, Dave, once you've solved anti-Semitism, you're out of a job. What would you do?
Well, I'm not anticipating this happening anytime soon, but if it did, I'd probably think of some more books to write. Definitely.
What would you write about next?
I mean, I've got a few different book ideas in my head, and I have no time to write any of them. That's part of the problem. Writing a book when you have a full-time job, they don't really go together. Mm-hmm. So probably that. I would, go on holiday more. Basically,
deserve it.
Do that. Do some more scuba diving. I like scuba diving because you don't get anti-Semitic fish. They just swim around.
Agents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorted that out.
program the next generation of Mossad sharks. Yeah, this comes back to how do you get away from all this stuff? And I think you do need, whether you're someone in my position or just any Jewish people, you need ways to just escape from it. It's felt so relentless the last couple of years for a lot of Jewish people, like you can't escape it. And especially if you're in politics, if you're in the media, if you're engaged with all these issues, and it's really important to switch off. It's really important. And there's nothing wrong with switching off and just not watching the news for a while, or, reading fiction, or, going swimming underwater and talking to fish, or whatever it is you want to do, to just get away from it all and not feel guilty about disengaging.
Similarly, I would say that also sort of engaging with Jewish joy has been a real sort of boost for me. In fact, not long after October 7th, there was a lot of, as you say, a lot of sort of events have been organised and sort of support for various people and charities. And I ended up at sort of accidentally a sort of, I thought it was like an Israeli dancing type thing where everybody was kind of going to do like a kind of almost a sponsored Israeli dancing thing. And I love a bit of simcha dancing. So that was right up my street. But it was sort of ended up really being more for teenagers. And I went up to North Manchester, and it was basically like a bunch of Yavna girls, all their mothers, sort of, at this massive sort of disco, so it was not really for me. I was a bit out of place, but it was really nice to watch all these teenage girls just sort of having a fabulous time and dancing to sort of Hebrew and Israeli music and just letting go. And it was a real sort of portrait of Jewish joy. Where have you found Jewish joy specifically in the last couple of years?
I think it's really important to do that. And I think when I've been at Simchas over the last couple of years, there's been a bit of extra edge to let's really enjoy ourselves. And I think remembering so many of the positives. I've got a friend, you may know actually, a guy called Jeremy Sassoon. He's a musician, and he has this amazing show called Musicians of Jewish Origin. And it's all about Jewish singer-songwriters, Jewish musicians over the last 100 years. And you go to his show, and it's amazing how many of the greatest songs, most famous songs in musical history, were written by Jews, both not just the famous, this sort of Amy Winehouse and Bob Dylan's and Carole King's, but the songwriters you've never heard of. And you come away from that show, and I always think, we're not bad as a people, as a small people. We've contributed quite a lot, and quite a lot of joy and quite a lot of happiness. And then there's just the weird stuff that makes me laugh in a way that only Jewish stuff would. I just come back from holiday in Cape Verde, of all places. And I thought I'd look up when I was there, is there a Chabad, right, in Cape Verde? And no, there isn't, because there's no Jews. But there is a Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Society, which is dedicated to sort of reviving the history of Jews who lived there a couple of hundred years ago. And I went on their website, and right at the top of their website in bold is this statement saying, "We do not have any contact with the Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Association," right? Who are this, and this, and this, they don't speak for us. Literally, there's not, the old Jewish joke about the guy who gets washed up in a desert island, he builds two shuls because there's one he can't go to. It's that, literally in real life.
Wow, the People's Front of Judea.
Even like, how amazing. Only our people could do that.
That's brilliant. Do you have a favourite thing about being Jewish?
Yeah, I think the sort of attitude to community and the sense of community, which can be a bit oppressive at times. It can be a bit like everyone's in everyone's business, but it adds such a rich layer to life, I think. And it can work in lots of different ways. I mean, I don't just mean like the formal big Jewish community, but the way that people connect. I was in Habonim, like I say, as a kid, I made friends for life. We spent a year in Israel after school, and almost all of us who were in that year scheme are still in contact today. That kind of attitude of just building those communal networks, and when you really need it, whether it's the happiest times in your life or the saddest times in your life, that's when it really kicks in. But also just on a day-to-day basis. And I think that is it just adds so much, and for such a small community as well. I think we do sort of punch above our weight in that way. It can do your head in sometimes, for sure. And working in the Jewish community, yeah.
I'm sure you're.
Sometimes the most, the most painful parts of your working day can come from within, not without. But that's just
Would you rather
joy.
Would you rather pick the phone up to an anti-Semite in the office or a Jewish person complaining about some aspects of the CST?
Could be the same person. No, look, I think it is. I do think, for better or for worse, we joke about it, but we do have a great community, and it does give a lot, I have to say.
To keep it on the up, I wondered if you could share a story or an anecdote of when you have successfully turned someone, someone who held anti-Semitic beliefs, and you have managed to convince them that they're an anti-Semite and they're wrong. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Changing someone's mind when they're really, really fixed in their belief is difficult. But educating someone when they have expressed anti-Semitic views, but inwardly they're not a bad person. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very doable. Well, say very doable. There are cases of that. There are examples of that. I mean, I'm actually having lunch on Monday with someone who was at the absolute center of a very public storm because they expressed anti-Semitic attitudes in a very public setting. They ended up getting suspended or stepping away from their work for months and so on and so on. And we've now become friends. And what's interesting for me is I was one of the people who first called them out on it. And I didn't quite appreciate the impact that would have on him, of calling him out. And so I learned something also about the even when you're calling people out for anti-Semitism, I mean, I don't mean like real hardcore haters, right? But ordinary people who say anti-Semitic stuff, when you're calling them out on it, there's still an element of a duty of care about how you use your words.
Yeah.
He learned a huge amount, was very regretful. And it's become, we now meet for lunch, 2, 3, 4 times a year. And it's become quite a lovely, and I suppose that sort of thing, when you talk about how do I sort of find the positivity in all of this, it's that sort of thing, I think. That, this is not a lost cause, right? Things can be improved. So that's one case.
That's amazing.
But,
I just wonder if or they'll soon be invited over for Miriam's roast potatoes. That's when you know.
That's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, all right.
Definitely.
Great. Well, do you think we've come to? I think we're at our Nisht for me climax now. Not sure that's a questionable use of that word. But we've talked a lot about what we find is Nisht for us over various episodes. But now that we're also interviewing guests, it'd be great to hear whether you have 1 or 2 or however many Nisht for yous. Yeah. What's Nisht for me? For Dave Rich.
Mushrooms.
Solid.
I'm not a fan of mushrooms. And for years, because I didn't eat them, so we didn't eat them at home. And then my kids suddenly one day reached an age where they realized they could independently eat mushrooms. And now everyone else eats mushrooms except me.
Is that how they rebelled? By bringing games and...
I can take that level of rebellion.
Nice job by me. Yeah.
Dave, we just want to thank you so much for sparing time to come on here because you do have a busy job, but I hope you've enjoyed coming on and talking about the sort of positives of Jewish life, and we definitely enjoyed.
Absolutely.
And felt somewhat reassured after that conversation.
Yeah, and enlightened, which always helps as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. So all that is left is for us to say Enkel Heinu Adon Olam, and if you're enjoying it, tune in next week, tell your friends, family, and we'll have another one then.
See you then.
Bye.
Hi again, Dave.
Hi there.
Welcome back to Nisht for Me.
the sequel for you?
It's an honour to be on twice already. That's quite
I
something.
know, yeah, absolutely. Our first return guest.
Yeah, very worthy. Thank you for making time for us again. As we've discussed offline, we thought it would be prudent of us to have a follow-up chat um, following the events of Yom Kippur this year. Because when we spoke to you, it, it weirdly felt like a very different time. Also, at the end of our chat, I think we said, thank you for the reassurance. It felt we came away feeling reassured.
Which you did, yeah.
Yeah, and then this seismic thing happened on Yom Kippur, and actually, it has been talked about as sort of a threshold was crossed when sort of Heaton Park happened, and we wanted to talk to you about that because when we spoke originally, we talked about anti-Semitism, and you said, there's nothing new under the sun, and yet now we've had this event that feels wildly different, and yeah, like something's completely changed. So we wanted to know how you felt about that. How do you marry those two thoughts?
You're absolutely right to describe it in that way. And it's absolutely correct that we did hit pause on our previous conversation because it does feel like a different world for Jewish people in Britain and in Manchester. And of course, we're all from Manchester. And my only hesitation and the strange thing about it that we have to think through is we always knew this was possible.
Yeah.
Right? This is why we have all the security. This is why we talk all the time about the terrorist threats to the Jewish community. We've seen it happen to Jewish communities all over the world. In the United States this year, in France for the past 20 years, in lots of other countries in Europe as well. So we've always known it could happen, but that never quite replicates the feeling of when it does happen and it happens to you in a place you're familiar with, to people you know, right? And I'm sure we all know people or know of people who were there. And that does take you into a different world. And it takes the Jewish community into it's very destabilizing because everything looks the same, but everything feels different. And how do we accommodate for that? And to a certain extent, that might just be a temporary adjustment, or it might be we're moving into a new phase of Jewish life here. The comparison a lot of people have made is to what happens to the Jewish community in France after this kind of anti-Jewish terrorism started there, really with the murder of Ilan Halimi in 2006. And then there were about a dozen French Jews were killed over the next 10, 15 years or so. And a huge chunk of the French Jewish community just left. I mean, some estimates put it up to 75,000, 100,000 French Jews left the country, completely transformed Jewish life. And are we at the start of that process now, or are we at a point where we can actually avoid going down that route? And I think that's the challenge for all of us now is how do we adjust to this new reality, even though it is, on the one hand, it feels completely different. And on the other hand, it has just made real what we always knew in theory was possible. And we thought we had mentally prepared for anyway, but you never really mentally prepare for it until it happens. And I think that's kind of what the community is going through at the moment.
That makes so much sense. And I think absolutely in terms of it's the mental reaction, because the physical reaction is why it wasn't so much worse than it could have been, is because all of the CST advice and planning and everything had been followed. And, we've all thought in the aftermath, it was reported by everybody that, God forbid none of that was in place, it would have been an even worse tragedy and, horror show than it was. But you're right, it doesn't change the sort of the mental reaction and the processing of it, which I guess is what we're sort of doing even now, kind of months on. But I remember in our first chat, we talked about, Bob Vylan, which still felt quite sort of recent at Glastonbury, and those chants becoming, sort of adopted by, the sort of various parties who like to go out and chant things. But do you think that sort of rhetoric kind of permitted the attack in some way? I mean, obviously the person who did it was travelling down that road for a long time, but do you think that sort of public acceptance of those chants kind of led to an air of people supporting it almost?
Look, you can look at everything that feeds in. You know, terrorism doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds on, or it comes from a whole atmosphere, a whole sort of culture of ideas and thinking and ideology and hatreds and conspiracy theories and all the rest of it, and all mixed up together. And you know, I mean, this is a point I've made elsewhere as well. When you get far right terrorism, people on the left are very happy and quick to point the finger at the people using the language in public that creates the radicalism and the extremism that leads an individual to take it that step further and go and kill people. When it comes from an Islamist terrorist, as this one was, people on the right do the same, but people on the left tend not to see it as a kind of racist attack, as an anti-Semitic attack, and apply the same sort of methodology to understanding it. But I think if we ask the question, what is the narrative? What are the narratives? What is the language? What is the discourse that created this very angry, radicalized environment, out of which a small number of individuals then go on and carry out violent attacks? Then you can chuck everything into it for the last 2 years. All the demonization of Jews, of Israel, all the sort of the anger and the hatred that is stirred up over that conflict in a way that is so different from anything else, you know, and the fact that it lands so often on Jews. And we see it all on social media. We see it on the protests. And there are people who are very, very influential in our culture who just don't seem to see that and don't seem to care about it, and almost want to play with fire.
Yeah.
Right? You know, so you take, for example, you know, Kneecap went on stage and praised Hamas and Hezbollah, right? And waved a Hezbollah flag. We've all seen the videos. We all know it happened, right? And they've had a huge, huge amount of support from across the music industry, from really big names, defending their right to do that, right? Now, firstly, I mean, I just find that astonishing, given that Hamas killed over 350 people at a music festival in Israel, and just what does that say? But secondly, you know, when Jewish bands have their gigs cancelled, these same voices in the music industry are nowhere. They don't care, right? So it's almost like this is all just part of the mix of how Jewish people are feeling. So I think it's very understandable that we look at the chants for Intifada, we look at the chants for resistance and the placards and the river to the sea and all of this. And we say, well, you want to know what the environment is, what the culture is that produced this terrorism. Not that Jihad al-Shami, we don't know exactly what he was reading and watching on his phone and all the rest of it. But that, broadly speaking, is going to produce terrorism like this. Well, of course it's all of that. Of course it is. You know, I mean, the reports of the people who were there say that when he was carrying out the attack, he was shouting, "This is what you get for killing our children." Right? Now, no one at Heaton Park synagogues killed any children. But it's that narrative all the time, that Israel deliberately goes out of its way to kill children as part of a genocide, and that anyone who's associated with Israel, anyone who's a Zionist, and next step, anyone who's Jewish, is somehow to blame for that. And we see this stuff all the time. That's why none of us were surprised, right? So, you know, you can't point the finger at a Kneecap or a Bob Villan or whatever and say you're directly responsible at all. But you can look at the whole thing, the whole basket, the fact that, you know, there have been calls for Intifada, which we all know is violent. Calls for resistance, which we all know means violence. On our streets, week after week, for 2 years, no one's been arrested, no one's been prosecuted. The organisers encourage it. So of course it ends up with something like this. I think it would be shocking if Jewish people weren't thinking in those terms now. We have a few things in our favour. One of them is, and this is different from where France was 20 years ago, as soon as the attack happened, the government named it as an anti-Semitic attack and an Islamist extremist attack. And naming and recognizing the problem is a very, very important first step. Now, translating that into action, that's the big test. And, everything that's going on over the Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa game and West Midlands Police, I think a lot of people are seeing that as a real test case now for, are our state institutions capable of standing up against the kind of extremism and the kind of hatred that is going to push Jewish people out of public life? And I think it's really, really important that our institutions step up their game on all of this across police, CPS, government, but also other parts of the public sector, hospitals, but also workplaces, universities, schools, right across the board, regulators, everyone. There is a big challenge here. Now, I think people at the top of government get this, and I think they understand this is actually a challenge. This is a threat to Britain as a country. And they've said that to me, to us, But all these institutions need to up their game. Now, we as a Jewish community, where are we? I think one of the incredible things that came out of the Manchester attack was the response of the community. The response of the people who were in synagogue that day, the response of the local community, we heard from police officers manning the cordon, and they're around the synagogue and all the rest of it. And they were saying they've never experienced anything like it in terms of the way the Jewish community was rallying around and, supporting them and bringing them cups of tea and all sorts of stuff. And we know that about our community. And I think when we spoke previously and you asked me what I like most about being Jewish, it's that sense of community. I think, we're speaking just before Hanukkah. And at CST, of course, we have to provide security for Hanukkah lightings, which are all public. And as of yesterday, we were aware of over 150 public Hanukkah lightings that are planned across the Jewish community for this Hanukkah. So people are not hiding away. Right? People are scared. Some people are thinking of leaving. People are not hiding away. I think there is a robustness and a resilience in our community that we're kind of discovering. And the other thing we're discovering is there's loads of people out there who, when they notice this stuff, they are on our side. We had hundreds and hundreds of online donations on our website from people who aren't Jewish, who came to the CST website and just left £10 and a message saying, I'm not Jewish, I'm horrified by this, we're with you. Right? Loads, really, really a large number. And we never get this normally. And I think something like the attack at Heaton Park, if there's ever a silver lining to something as awful as that, I think it woke up a lot of people to the fact that this is a serious issue, this is a serious problem. And when they're put on the spot and have to have an opinion on it, most people in this country are with us. I'm more convinced of that than ever. At the same time, this morning when I was scrolling through X, which is never a good thing to do first thing in the morning.
Not a great way to start your day.
And I came across Russell Brand interviewing Candace Owens, and there's a short clip where Candace Owens is going on and on and on about how Jews use incest to abuse their children to normalize evil so that their children will grow up as psychopaths and then inflict evil on others, right? And Russell Brand has clipped this bit of the interview and put it out on his X account. And I think as of this morning, up around 280,000 people had seen it or something. So the flip side of it is the anti-Semitism is out of control. And it's not even hidden, it's not coded, it's openly anti-Jewish, it is Nazi-style anti-Semitism, and it is getting huge audiences, and it has the name on it of really famous public figures who have lots of followers, and it's out of control. And no one has an answer for how to deal with that, basically. So that's the flip side. That's the thing that's shaping our world, and that's our challenge for us and for the people who do get it and who are on our side. We can't fight this fight the old-fashioned way, right? Because how do you stop Russell Brand putting that on X when the owner of X doesn't care, right? And puts his own conspiracy stuff out about other minorities all the time. You know, can the law, can the police even deal with that? I mean, these are the challenges.
Strange, because Russell Brand seems like such a stand-up guy as well.
Yeah, I did see, Australia had banned social media for under 16s,
I
and I was
know.
thinking, how about for under 65s?
Yeah.
That might help.
You said you were an optimistic person last time we spoke. Are you still optimistic?
I mean, that is, I will admit, it is harder to just sort of automatically fall into a sort of reflexive optimism about how things are going to go. I'm not wholly pessimistic, I should say. I don't buy this idea that either that Britain is doomed or that the Jewish community in Britain is doomed at all. And I think, but it's kind of up to us. It's on us. I do think we're at a stage now where we can't just sit back and let things play out and assume everything will turn out for the best.
So what do we do? What
There
do you
is a
say?
challenge for all of us. And I'm not just talking about Jewish people. I'm talking about everyone well, I think there's a few different things. I said earlier, there's a challenge for all the kind of institutions across the state and private sector as well to really step up on this, to recognise this is a serious issue. It has the power to kill people in this country. It has the power to exclude the Jewish community from public life to a degree that people want to leave the country. And therefore, it has the power to rip society apart. And therefore, it is on everyone to recognise this threat and actually step up and deal with it when it happens in your workplace or hospital or police force area. Where, you've got to be strong. But I think there's something here for the Jewish community as well, that this resilience is important. Like, how we respond to this is in our control. And we shouldn't cede control of that to the anti-Semites and the haters and the people who want to marginalise Jews. We have that within us. We are still a pretty strong, well-organised community with a lot of people who have opinions about what to do and want to enact them. So blessing and a curse sometimes. But again, I look at, 150 Channukah lightings 2 months after 2 Jews were killed in a synagogue on Yom Kippur. That says to me there's a community here who's not giving up. And whether it's through bloody-mindedness or faith in the future or a combination of the two or just habit, that's the challenge for all of us as Jews, to retain that positivity and that sense of, this is our country and we're not going to be forced out of here, and we're going to work with the people who support us to fight for that. And I think there is that. I think that attitude is there. That's my optimism.
I like it.
That is there.
I want to soundtrack it to the song that our kids are doing in the Hanukkah play. You know that?
Yeah.
Fight, 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 fight for the night.
I'm just amazed that the word fedora appears, as if 5-year-old kids are going to know what.
Do you know what
put
that
on
is?
Your fedora.
It's light, 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 light up the night, and then it's fight, fight, fight something.
I only know the fedora line.
Not fight for a fedora.
It's not as inspirational.
But I feel like your words, that song, we can all feel good about
Absolutely.
the future. I think we'll. What are you doing for Hanukkah, Dave?
Eating too many. You get invited to so many
I'm sure.
Hanukkah events. I actually think we need to make Hanukkah longer than 8 nights. I mean, I think the new miracle of Hanukkah is, can you get to every Hanukkah lighting and donut and lacquer event you're invited to in the space of 8 days? And the answer is no. So we need to extend
It's
it.
true.
We're in the world where it's a present a night for the kids, though, so I can't extend it anymore. It's too much. The sort of conversations we're having.
Yeah, that always. Do you give the big present at the start or the end?
I have got a Hanukkah yo-yo night, just a yo-yo. I think
that's strong.
That's fine, and a Hanukkah arts and crafts night, just like some sort of Hanukkah stickers. I wonder how that's going to go down. But yeah, they're not having a big present.
What is this bullshit?
we would always start off small with stickers and yo-yo and then build up. And by
Exactly.
night 4, they would be in absolute revolt that these presents were rubbish.
Socks.
Yes, I do have Hanukkah. Asda does Hanukkah pajamas. That's a sign of solidarity, isn't it?
Yeah,
Allyship. And Matalan. There you go.
Matalan as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
There you
Yeah.
go. Left you on
Yeah.
a positive note there, Dave.
Yeah, might have to get a pair.
Do send us a picture.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dave. We really appreciate you giving us your time again. And yeah, we feel better having spoken, as always, with you. So thank you again.
And thanks for doing what you do.
Absolutely.